Lone Rider here, and we've got a meeting on mountain bike access in Watchung on March 7th, and there was actually a news article about that on a local New Jersey website, and two very interesting things came out of it. One was the hypocrisy of the mountain bike opponents, and one was the fact that a lot of them just don't know a lot about mountain biking, if not anything at all. As far as hypocrisy goes, he claims he's a hiker. Now, a lot of the mountain bikers I know, including myself, also hike. We don't have a problem with sharing the trail. But this guy claimed he was a hiker. And he said, well, they want to build, the proposal is to build 14 miles of new trails. That'll be just for bikes. And that's supposed to address the concern that people have about sharing the trails with cyclists. I don't think there's a problem with sharing the trails. It works at every other park in the state, basically, in every other county, but for some reason they think the laws of physics are different here or whatever. Well, this was supposed to basically remove that concern, but they still have the concern. They don't even want us in the park, even if we're on separate trails, which to me, at that point, I fail to understand the logic behind it, even if you believe that there are concerns about sharing the trail. They're not. I mean, there might be some overlap at intersections, but generally speaking, the vast bulk of the trails are going to be separate, and I don't understand why if you're hiking on another trail and you're not going to cross paths with the bikers, why you would care, I guess they can't stand the idea of sharing. That's the only thing I can think of. In other words, it's not about a specific concern, it's an ideologically motivated objection, which is why addressing specific concerns, like talking about how you can safely share the trail, talking about whether or not bikes damage the trails more than other user groups or less, etc. You can address these concerns when they're brought up, but it doesn't convince them because their main objection is ideological. But this fellow Toth, who T-O-T-H, who claimed he was a hiker, one of the things he said was, well, these 14 miles of new trails are going to be just for bikes. By not allowing people to hike on them, you're denying us access to a public space. I laughed so hard, coffee almost came out my nose. Hold on. First of all, you and people like you are the reason that they are building separate trails rather than just letting us ride in part or all of the park. They're building separate trails because people like you don't think we can share. So then you're turning around and complaining, but the trails are going to be separate. I'm not going to be allowed to hike on these new trails that you're building. You have an existing 40 miles of trails in the park that you can hike on. They're building 13, 14 miles of trails for us. And by the way, this is going to be the only area in the entire county's park system, not just in this park, but in the entire county's park system, that's going to be officially open to bikes. When they put up the no new bike signs at Watchung, they also put them up at other places where there hadn't been any before. So what it's looking like is, in addition to creating a new trail plan for Watchung that includes mountain biking, they're also modifying the trail plan for the entire county and expanding the extra legal ban from 1995, which was created in the backroom by a bunch of unelected hacks. That was created just for Watchung, because people at the time didn't like people biking with it. Now it seems they've expanded that as a new thing to the entire county. So little things like the Dinky Passaic River Park down the street from my house, which I grew up riding, the trail's like less than a mile long and there's 2 no bike signs there. And they put them all at all other county parks. So out of all the parks in the entire county, we're getting access to like 13, 14 miles of trails at this one park. That's it. And they're complaining about that. They've closed every trail in the county, trails which were never closed before, by the way. Just this past year, they've closed them to mountain biking, putting up no new bike signs everywhere. Not just at Watchung where they had them before, they were taken down, and they were down for 6 months, from December through August, but they didn't just put them back up at Watchung, in other words. They put them all over the county at places where they never had them before. So effectively, these are new trail closures. In other words, we're losing access to trails all over the county. We're gaining access to one trail in a tiny portion of this park that, by and large, doesn't affect any other park users at all. And they still don't like that. I can't wrap my mind around it. But the irony, of course, is that he's saying, well, but you won't let us hike on these new trails that you're building for the mountain bikers. It's just for bikes. You're denying us access to a public space. What the fuck do you think the bike ban that you approve of has been doing for 20 years? Denying us access to a public space. So it's good for you to deny other people, but not for those other people to be given some access, and then you're complaining, well, but I can't hike on the bike trails that they're building. You have 40 miles of other trails in this park, and you have every other park in the county that's bike-free. Now, you don't want us on these, like, 13 or 14 miles of trail. And the objection that you have is that, well, but you're not allowing hikers to have access. You're denying us our right to a public space. What do you think the anti-bike policy that you approve of does and has been doing off and on for 20 years? The hypocrisy is absurd. But beyond the hypocrisy, of course, is the fact that they don't understand cycling. They don't know anything about it. I'm a biker. I've been a biker for over 20 years. On the road and off. Here's the thing. Who knows more about cycling? People who bike or people who don't bike? Well, you can see that in some of the objections raised in this article. Well, one guy, I don't know if it was this talk though, but it may have been, but one person who objected to cycling said something to the effect of, well, people could be going at 30 miles an hour down a trail and that's unsafe. 30 miles an hour as a cruising speed on flat ground is extremely high for the road. Maybe pro racers. Most of us were riding along in a pace line or a handful of friends. The most we're usually doing is around 20. And a solo rider just cruising along, I mean, unless he's a pro athlete, is usually going to be, and this is on smooth pavement, is usually going to be cruising along between, let's say, 15, maybe 17 miles an hour and 20 at the max, usually. Sometimes, again, you've got a bunch of really fit young guys going really fast in the pace line. They might be going in the low to mid-20s. 30 miles an hour is extremely rare for most avid riders. Again, unless you're talking about like the pro circuit or some kind of a race, like a criterium event. Now, downhill, it's different. If I'm going down a really, really steep hill, I mean, I've got up to 45 miles an hour or more. That's down a really steep hill on a paved road. Now, Watchung is hilly, but it's off-road and it's uneven. It's not paved. That's the whole point. It's off-road riding. I've never gotten up, not just at Watchung, when I was riding there between December and August when the signs were down, and we thought the park was going to be open. Not just at Watchung, but at any other place I've ever mountain biked. Say River Park, Lewis Morris, which does have some long downhill sections. I've never gotten up to 30 miles an hour off-road, ever, in over 20 years of cycling. I don't know many other people who have either. Certainly it's not commonplace to cruise at that speed. On a downhill, maybe, but we're talking cross-country and all mountain riding, basically just riding around. We're not talking a dedicated downhill course. If this was a dedicated downhill race course, yeah, people would be going 30 miles an hour. That's not what it is. It's recreational trails in a public park. And so people don't go that fast, precisely because we know more about cycling than the people who are complaining about cycling. And what we know is that, well, gee,